Coming to the West Tampa Chamber of Commerce is like coming home. So hello, brothers and sisters. Thank you for having me back and not booing me every time that I give a speech here. Today, my assignment is simple. E.J., what happened 100 years ago when the city of West Tampa ceased to exist and a new, big city of Tampa was born? Well, for those of you that are new in West Tampa, for those of you that haven't learned about what a historic community we are, West Tampa was an independent city that lasted for more than 30 years. The Florida legislature incorporated the new city of West Tampa in 1895, and it existed until December 31, 1924, as the clock struck into 1925. So this is the 100th anniversary of the city of Tampa embracing West Tampa. What was West Tampa 100 years ago? West Tampa was the fifth largest city in Florida. The city of Tampa was anxious to incorporate and annex the city of West Tampa with its many cigar factories, because it became the second largest city in the state of Florida. So when those two cities, neighbors, merged, they became the second largest city in the state of Florida. It had had 8 elected mayors, 121 city councilmen from West Tampa, and as it joined, these mayors that were still alive stayed active in making Big Tampa even bigger than the founders had ever expected. I brought this important picture because it should be the singular picture for the West Tampa Chamber of Commerce, because it is the moment at McFarland Park when both the City Council of Tampa and the City Council of West Tampa, with their respective mayors, came together, and standing next to the centerpiece of the mayors is the real father of West Tampa, by the name of Hugh Campbell McFarland. He was an immigrant from Scotland, had been brought to Boston at a very early age, studied to be a lawyer, got married, had a child, who would eventually be one of the 8 mayors of West Tampa by the name of James McFarland, divorced the lady and moved to New Orleans, and heard that the railroad and the cigar industry had just come to a place called Tampa. And that young immigrant from Scotland, now a practicing attorney, decided, I'm going to Tampa. When he got to Tampa, he saw how the eastern coast of our river, the eastern bank, was being leveled, and homes were being built. Cigar factories were being built. Grocery stores, barber shops, beauty parlors, department stores, saloons. And he said, who is behind all of that? And they told him, it's a Spaniard with a group of Spanish enterprising young men who have bought 100 acres over on the east side of the river, and they are developing that into our most important industry. Tampa had no industry. Tampa had a little more than 800 in population. And all of a sudden, these foreign-speaking cigar makers and cigar manufacturers had brought an industry to Tampa. They were importing the tobacco from Cuba. They were using the steamships of Mr. Plant. And this man from Scotland said, if the Spaniards can do it over on the East Bank, if I could buy land on the West Bank, I could develop a similar cigar city. So he started acquiring acres and more acres. And then there was a gentleman who had moved down from Nebraska. He was not originally from Nebraska, but he had lived in Nebraska and came to Tampa. And he also observed what the Spaniards were doing and what Hugh Campbell McFarland was doing, and Mr. George Benjamin, the second mayor of the city of West Tampa, also started buying and developing more land and more land on the West Bank. They would go down to Key West or Philadelphia or New York or Chicago and convince cigar manufacturers, the owners of the factory who were Spaniards, if you move your factory over to our community, we'll build you your cigar factory. We'll give you a home for you and your family, but you have to bring your 300 or 400 or 500 employees, and we will build homes for them. So it became a quid pro quo. Before you knew it, Ybor City had 10 cigar factories. Before you knew it, West Tampa had 10 cigar factories. And Mr. McFarland said, let's incorporate the city of West Tampa. So the legislature in 1895 created this new city, and our city of West Tampa grew and grew. I've brought you a copy of the seal of West Tampa. If you notice, the seal of West Tampa is found wherever we have put a historical marker, like for instance in front of the West Tampa Library. You'll have markers there that have this seal. The seal of West Tampa, of course, has 2 horns of plenty, because Mr. McFarland said there's a plenty money to be made in West Tampa. So 2 horns of plenty with a palm tree, of course. But those of you of Cuban extraction, pay attention that at the top of the West Tampa seal, there is the Lone Star. That's not the Lone Star from Texas, where I went to law school. It's the Lone Star from the flag of Cuba. Why? Because the Spaniards owned the factories, but the people that worked in the factories were Cubans. And West Tampa had so many Cuban families that the crackers used to call West Tampa Cuba City. In the seal, they incorporated the Lone Star of Cuba. This was the seal, and sometime the West Tampa Chamber may want to consider adopting the West Tampa seal that ceased to exist as a city in 1925, 100 years ago, as the seal that you may want to consider for the West Tampa Chamber of Commerce. Charles Dickens wrote a very famous book. I'm sure all of you read it when you were in school. The Tale of Two Cities. And West Tampa was exactly that. The city of Tampa and the city of West Tampa. So in the Tale of Two Cities, the major industry of the cigar industry became so powerful, so important, that these two cities together had more, listen up now, these two cities had more than 200 cigar factories. It's a lot of people to employ. A lot of salaries going out on Fridays and Saturday. A lot of money to be spent. West Tampa and Ybor City gave the city of Tampa the first major industry that it had. It became so important. It became so productive that Tampa soon was the cigar capital of Florida. And it wasn't long after that our factories in Tampa and West Tampa and Palmetto Beach and Port Tampa were making more cigars than they were making in Cuba. So Tampa became the cigar capital of the world. And of course, our cigars were put in another sister industry, the cigar box factories. We had a number of cigar box factories in West Tampa and Ybor City. On the base of the box, every box that went out had the seal of the city of Tampa with the mascot saying, "Made in Tampa." So if you were in Cleveland, or if you were in Seattle, or if you were in Las Vegas, you would look at the box and you would say, "Where is Tampa?" And Tampa quickly got on the map. Cigars became very, very popular. In fact, many pictures of our leading political leaders, sports figures, movie actors, great political leaders like Winston Churchill, you always saw him with his stogie. Many of those cigars were made in Tampa. So, Tampa in these 100 years has grown significantly. While you all were talking and I was listening in the different tables, you all were talking about how long it takes you now to go from point A to point B. It used to take me 10 minutes. Now it takes me 20. Or, man, it's bumper to bumper wherever I go. In that table over there, they were saying, "Do you know it took me almost 1 hour to go from downtown to Lutz?" Well, things have changed. Currently, in case you're not aware of it, Hillsborough County now has almost 1,560,000 residents. That's 1.5 million people in Hillsborough County. In the city of Tampa today, our population is easily 500,000 in population. Tampa is the third largest city in Florida. It is the 11th fastest growing city in the United States and the 53rd largest city in the nation. The greater Tampa Bay area, which incorporates a number of our sister counties in the area, has a population of more than 3 million people. To be exact, 3,200,000 people. No wonder it takes you almost an hour to go from downtown to Lutz. Currently, our county of Hillsborough is the 4th largest in the state of Florida. Our neighbor, Polk County needs to be watched carefully. It is the fastest growing county in the state of Florida and in the United States, especially when you look at Lakeland and Winter Haven. And if Lakeland is growing west, it's going to merge with Plant City. But getting back to 100 years ago, the 8 mayors that we had served our community and served well. Your Chamber of Commerce, in one of its many annual calendars, published the pictures of the 8 mayors. The last mayor, Enrique Enriquez, is in this picture, standing next to the mayor of Tampa, Perry Wall. Of course, they all respect Mr. McFarland. But these 8 men made significant history in West Tampa. Of the West Tampa mayors, we had Fernando Figueredo Socarrás, Cuban-born, who left West Tampa as mayor to become the treasurer of the new Republic of Cuba. George Benjamin, that had moved down from Nebraska and found so much good land and productive land here that he wrote to his many friends up north and urged them, come on down, you're going to really like Tampa and West Tampa. He brought down so many people from Nebraska that they were all living in a long strip, and that's why we have Nebraska Avenue. Then you had Francisco Milian, a Cuban who was quite an intellectual individual. And the way that he made his living was working in the cigar factories as director. There was no school system, so the cigar makers would hire a lecturer to read the newspapers and read the novels in the afternoon. Many of those cigar workers barely knew how to read and write, but they listened. Some of them became so interested that they went to the West Tampa Library. The only library that they had in Hillsborough County was right here. Mr. Carnegie from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a multimillionaire, had given money for public libraries. They did not use the word public back then. It was free libraries. It wasn't public schools back then. It was free schools. In West Tampa, they would always give it the Spanish tone, free school. Mr. Milian was reading materials that the cigar makers wanted to hear. Some of the cigar factory owners didn't like what was being heard. And one day, while he was the mayor of West Tampa, he got visited by a vigilante group who literally kidnapped him, took him to the port, deported him, and said, "Don't come back to Tampa." His boat got as far as Key West. He was quickly able to get his family and friends in Key West, and he came back to West Tampa as a hero and got reelected as mayor. Then we had an outstanding individual by the name of Peregrino Rey. We have a park in downtown West Tampa called Rey Park for a distinguished mayor of West Tampa and longtime city councilman from West Tampa and chairman of the West Tampa City Council, a Spaniard from the northwest corner of Spain in Galicia. He has an interesting name, Peregrino, In English, that means pilgrim. So Pilgrim Ray visits us every time we pass Ray Park on Howard and Cherry and we wave. Peregrino Ray Spirit waves back. And then we had Hugh Brady. Hugh Brady had the horses and the stables and the stage coaches in West Tampa. There on what used to be called Francis, now we call it Albany. Albany and Union. It wasn't Union when he was the mayor of West Tampa. Union Street was called Oak. We had two streets 100 years ago when the city of Tampa annexed the city of West Tampa. They had the street of Francis, which the city already had, and they had Oak, which the city of Tampa already had. So they changed those names, and Francis became Albany, and Oak became Union. Why would anybody want to name a street Francis? That was the wife of Hugh Campbell McFarland. So Mrs. McFarland was honored with one of the important streets in West Tampa. And the other street was Howard. That was Mr. McFarland's other son. He was never mayor of West Tampa, as James had been, but he was the city attorney for the city of West Tampa when West Tampa became part of the city of Tampa. And then James McFarland, who had been born from the first marriage of Mr. McFarland up in Massachusetts, he had moved to West Tampa, lived in the McFarland Park area, and he became the 6th mayor of West Tampa. Then we had Blas Fernandez O'Halloran, one of the oldest cigar factories that we have had in West Tampa. In fact, where the West Tampa Library is now is where the original Fernandez O'Halloran cigar factory was located. And then the last mayor of West Tampa was Enrique Enriquez. He was the general manager of one of our big cigar factories, and he is the great-grandfather of our tax assessor, who we all call Coach Enriquez. These were leaders, heroes, and luminaries. To go through this particular picture with you, over on that far end, the short man is Joe Ray. I knew Joe Ray as an important insurance agency owner. He used to have his Joe Ray insurance company directly over the Bank of West Tampa on the corner of Main and Howard, across from my parents' department store, which is now Salcines Park. Next to Joe Ray is Arturo Morales, who served many, many years on our West Tampa chamber. He was like the bookkeeper of one of our large cigar factories. And then we have James McCants. He was a city councilman from the city of Tampa that was annexing our city of West Tampa. The city of Tampa was going through an experiment, and they had changed the name of city councilman, and they called the city councilman for a short period of 8 years commissioners. And then next to James McCant is the famous George Benjamin. He had been a councilman for many years and twice mayor of West Tampa. And then next to him is the outgoing mayor of West Tampa, Enrique Enriquez, with his hands crossed. And then next to him is the mayor of Tampa at that time, Perry G. Wall. He's the one with a hat and cane in his hand. Those of you that are old like me will remember that downtown Tampa had a very large hardware store called Knight and Wall, an old hardware store that we all visited sooner or later. And of course, his brother-in-law was a very famous lawyer that we had here in Tampa, Peter O'Knight, for whom we have the airport in Davis Island. And then you had the famous Hugh Campbell McFarland with glasses. And then next to him, you have the city commissioner from Tampa by the name of Dr. Sumter L. Lowry. We have Lowry Park named for him. And then you have a Spaniard by the name of Jose Vasquez, who was on the West Tampa City Council. And then you have Dr. F.L. Adams right next to Mr. Vasquez, and he was on the school board of West Tampa. And standing next to him is Councilman William Barrett, hat in hand, who was a West Tampa City Councilman in 1903, 1904, 1905, and 1906. That picture really tells us the merger of both the city of Tampa and the city of West Tampa. What happened, E.J., as the merger occurred? Well, one of the important things that you want to remember is the development of bridges. Bridges were very important in the development of Tampa. We had bridges that started crossing from one end to the other. From Platte, we already had Fortune, we already had Lafayette, which we now call Kennedy, and it wasn't long after that that you had Cass. And then we had a bridge that existed even before the merger that we used to call the old Garcia Avenue Bridge. Those old-timers from West Tampa remember the old wooden bridge that would take us from Old Robert City, where Blake High School is now located, crossing over into Palm Avenue. We now call that bridge the Holtzinger Bridge. So many bridges occurred in the following 10 years. And something had just happened the month before West Tampa ceased to exist, and that was the Gandy Bridge. 100 years ago, the Gandy Bridge opened up as a toll bridge. It saved us a lot of miles because we crossed over Tampa Bay over into St. Petersburg. It was during the war, during the Second World War, that the government took over and it was no longer a toll bridge. In the 30s, we also had another very brave engineer who married a girl from West Tampa. She used to live at McFarland Park, and he was Ben T. Davis. And he came up with the idea, let's make a shorter route to Clearwater. And we have the Ben T. Davis Causeway, which was improved, and they called it for a congressman of the area, the Courtney Campbell Causeway. So many good things were happening with the merger that had occurred and the follow-up of the merger. West Tampa lost an important academy. In 1929, 4 years after the merger, the Sisters of Holy Name told the people of West Tampa that they had bought some land from a gentleman from West Tampa by the name of Angel Cuesta from the Cuesta and Rey cigar factory, and they had purchased orange groves on Bayshore Boulevard, and they were going to build a new school there. They closed the Downtown Academy, they closed the West Tampa Academy, and it became, as we all know, the Academy of Holy Names. In its place, however, the Salesian sisters were invited to come to West Tampa. And then instead of being the Academy of Holy Names, it was St. Joseph's School. Many of us that are here are products of the Salesian sisters. Many of us continue going to St. Joseph Church. Many landmarks are still here in West Tampa, and all of you, as good West Tampa members of this chamber, should be aware of the great history of the cigar factories that still exist. Some of them have burned, some of them have been torn down, but we still have a number of landmark buildings. Please always keep an eye on those buildings because they tell our story. The largest of all the cigar factories in West Tampa, in fact, the largest cigar factory in all of Hillsborough County, sits here in West Tampa, and it is the famous Antonio Santaella y Compañía. If you notice, it is the building that sits between Spruce and Chestnut on Armenia. It's a very unique. Not only is it the largest, it had 1,000 employees. But Mr. Santaella was so concerned with all the fires that were consuming cigar factories in Ybor City and elsewhere, that when he bought that entire block, he told his engineers and his architects, don't build it on the side of Chestnut, don't build it on the side of Spruce. Build me this factory right in the middle of the block. It's the only cigar factory in all of Hillsborough County that sits right dab in the middle of the block. I'm glad that Olga Rhodes is here today because her father and her uncle were very important managers there at the Santaella Cigar Factory. Olga was not around when West Tampa merged, but it wasn't long after that that she was born. So Olga, we're celebrating 100. You're not 100 yet. But God bless you. The Spanish bean soup must be working because you look fantastic. So as we commemorate the achievements of West Tampa, you all are now the trustees of the future of West Tampa. Just think of the numbers that I gave you, how much we are growing, how big a population we have. All of those things are important incentives so that the future of West Tampa, the future of the city of Tampa, the future of our great county of Hillsborough is going to be bigger and better because of what you do and what you demand for the future. Our future may be beyond our vision, but it is in your hands how Tampa, West Tampa, and Hillsborough County will develop over the next 100 years. Thank you very much. Did I go over too long?